You can wait outside, Mr. Carson said, without even turning to look at me. Interns don't sit with executives. He said it loud enough for the others to hear. His voice dripped with condescension, the kind that cuts not because of volume, but because of certainty, as if he was so sure I didn't matter. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where are you from and from which city you're watching our videos? And after watching the whole video, don't forget to tell us, what would you do in this situation? Be honest, tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. The room laughed. Polished shoes shuffled over high-gloss marble as the door shut, sealing off the heavy conference room. The kind with walls thick enough to keep secrets. Glass doors tinted just enough to remind those outside where they didn't belong. I stood still in the hallway, holding the tray of coffees no one asked for, trying not to let my fingers tremble. I could still feel the burn from the paper cup's heat, but what stung more was the smug smirk Carson gave me just before turning his back. What they didn't know was this. I wasn't just the intern. I wasn't even here to learn. I owned 38% of the company they were so proud to represent. Silently, I pulled out my phone. I tapped one number. It rang twice. Mr. Ellison, I said calmly. Initiate the restructure now. Send the email. And make sure Carson reads it before the meeting ends. Yes, Ms. Gray, he replied, without hesitation. I didn't even hang up. I just stared at the frosted glass door of the conference room, my own reflection staring back at me. Auburn hair pulled into a low bun, business casual blouse they thought made me look junior. I looked like I didn't belong there. That was intentional. 10 minutes later, the door opened. A young assistant in heels too tall and voice too nervous poked her head out. Ms. Gray? They want you inside. I walked in, not slowly, not timidly. I walked with precision. Carson looked up, confusion on his face. Around the room, the senior executives looked uncomfortable. A few checked their phones. One had already started sweating. Ms. Gray, Carson began, trying to reassert control. I pulled out the chair at the head of the table and sat. Carson stopped mid-sentence. No one dared speak. I reached into the folder I brought, not a resume, but the documents proving my recent acquisition, enough shares to outvote every single board member sitting at that table. The silence? It was golden. My name is Emery Gray, I said, calm but sharp. I've been here for the past 6 months under observation as an intern. But after this morning's board approval and restructuring, I'm now the acting executive vice president and the largest stakeholder in this company. Carson's face drained of color. You'll find new reporting structures in your inbox, I continued. And Mr. Carson, I'm afraid your position has been reassigned. Effective immediately. He laughed once. A short, stunned bark. You're kidding, he said, eyes darting to the others. This is a joke. She's just a intern. I tilted my head. That was your word. I was actually sent by my father's estate, David Gray. Perhaps you remember him. Co-founder. Retired before your time. The room went still. One man slowly took off his glasses. Another let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Carson sat back in his chair. You played us. No, I said, folding my hands. I observed you. There's a difference. There was a certain kind of pleasure in watching arrogance unravel in real time. His face flickered with disbelief, panic, and then desperation, all in the span of seconds. I worked my way up for 10 years, he muttered. And you just inherited your seat. I didn't inherit my voice. I cut in. That I earned. You taught me something in the last 6 months. How not to lead. And now I get to fix what you broke.
No one dared to laugh this time.
I looked around the room. Let's begin. The room was still frozen when I clicked the remote and the company's latest quarterly numbers appeared on the screen. No one dared to speak, not even to whisper. I didn't give them time. Let's not waste time pretending we're here for a casual update, I said. This company is bleeding internally, and it's not from external market pressure. It's from mismanagement, outdated thinking, and unchecked egos. I stared directly at Carson. He flinched. The screen changed. A pie chart. One glaring red segment. This department, I pointed, has lost over $14 million in the last 3 quarters, despite budget increases. Care to explain, Mr. Carson?
He started to speak.
Then stopped. His jaw tensed. No more cocky comebacks. No more smug leadership. Just silence. Of course, I continued coolly. You won't have to answer today. Since your new role is officially Director of Legacy Operations, an honorary position with no executive authority. HR will escort you to clean your office after this. He opened his mouth again, but I held up one hand. I suggest you don't speak until you've read your NDA. It was revised this morning. He looked at the others, those who once followed his every word. They didn't even blink. Power shifts like an avalanche. Slow at first, then unstoppable. A woman on the far end, Maya Freeman, Director of Legal, cleared her throat gently. Ms. Gray, she said with an uncertain smile, what exactly is the plan going forward? I appreciated the question. She was testing me but also offering me the floor. I met her gaze. Transparency, accountability, and modernization. We're not gutting the company. We're cleaning the infection. Somewhere in the room, someone softly muttered, finally. I kept going, sliding page after page, until we hit a slide labeled New Executive Appointments. The room tensed. 3 names filled the screen. Young names. Unfamiliar ones to most of the old guard. Names I had spent the last few months researching. People who worked hard, stayed unseen, and were never invited into the room simply because they didn't play golf or wear a Rolex. They were already waiting outside. I nodded to the assistant. The doors opened. 3 people walked in, mid-30s, early 40s, confident but respectful. All dressed modestly. All confused until they saw me. Then their eyes lit up. I introduced each one. I didn't use titles like Mr. or Ms. I used full names. I explained their work history in the company, their ideas, their impact, and why they now hold the positions of COO, CFO, and Chief Strategy Officer. Carson laughed dryly. This is a joke. A complete circus. I slowly turned to him. Mr. Carson, I said, you called me sweetheart on my first week here and asked if I knew how to use the printer. Remember that? He froze. You forgot the intern might be the one watching you. That shut him up. I turned to the others. You all thought I was just someone trying to get a full-time position. What I wanted was to see how you treat people when you don't think they're important. And it was true. The microaggressions, the looks, the dismissals, the way everyone assumed my silence was ignorance instead of strategy. My father didn't give me this position, I added. He told me I could earn it if I had the guts to walk through fire and stay silent long enough to learn. Now it was Maya who spoke. And what happens now?
Now,
I said. We build something better. A round of hesitant nods followed. By noon, Carson was gone. Walked out without a word, security flanking both sides. Some of the execs didn't even look up when he left. One even smiled faintly. Karma's footsteps are slow, but heavy. Back in my temporary office, the one they put me in near the copy room, I finally exhaled. My hands trembled a little. It wasn't over. It had only just begun. My phone buzzed. It was a message from my mother. Saw the email. So proud of you. Your dad would be too. Come home tonight. I'll cook. I smiled, then stared at the ceiling. For 6 months I ate lunch alone. Was told to stay quiet in meetings I wasn't even allowed into. Endured whispers, rumors, and fake smiles. All so I could see the truth with my own eyes. And I had. Now, I wasn't just here to claim a title. I was here to rebuild a culture that destroyed people quietly. And I knew the battle ahead wouldn't be pretty. Especially since Carson wasn't the only one who'd underestimated me. 2 days after Carson's removal, the company's hallways felt colder, not literally, but in the way people whispered when they thought no one was listening. Old alliances were crumbling. New power dynamics were forming. And in the center of it all, I could feel the tension boiling. I wasn't just the new EVP now. I was the girl who took down a legend. To some, That made me a hero. To others, a threat. The night before, I'd received an anonymous email. No text. Just an image attached. It was a photo of me, alone, sitting on a bench outside the office at 8:12 p.m. From across the street. From a low angle. I hadn't noticed anyone. Beneath it was a single line. You should have stayed in your lane. I didn't forward it to security. Not yet. I didn't want to play scared. But I also didn't want to be naive. Carson had connections. Deep ones. I knew he wouldn't just slink off into irrelevance. That morning, I walked into the boardroom early. My 3 new executives were already there. Elijah, strategy, Nina, finance, and Theo, operations. They looked up, alert and focused. We've got a problem, Theo said, tapping his iPad. Someone leaked next quarter's marketing plan. Competitor just posted a campaign, almost identical. Same slogan. Same timing. Internal leak? I asked. Has to be, Elijah replied. Only a dozen people had access. One of them is still loyal to Carson. I didn't react outwardly, but my stomach twisted. Of course he wouldn't go quietly. Do we have a trace?
Not yet, Nina said.
But we've locked files moving forward. Whoever it is, they underestimated our forensics team. I leaned forward. Then let's hit back. Quietly. No panic. We're not victims. We're smarter. The meeting shifted into overdrive. I was no longer the silent intern. I was the strategist. The one calling the plays. But deep down, I felt it. That sinking feeling in the gut, when you know something bigger is coming. That feeling was confirmed when Maya, our legal director, walked in an hour later with a hard face. You're going to want to see this, she said, placing a folder in front of me. Inside were transcripts, memos, screenshots, an entire trail of correspondence between Carson and 2 lower-level directors, coordinating sabotages, slowing down initiatives, even misleading investors. My hand gripped the edge of the table. This is felony level, Maya said quietly. SEC would have a field day. We can bring it public if you want. No, I said. Not yet. Why? Because I want to talk to him first. That evening, I had him tracked. He was having drinks at a luxury hotel bar downtown. Still smug. Still smug enough to wear the same silver tie pin he always wore, the one shaped like a wolf. Fitting. I didn't call ahead. I showed up. He spotted me before I reached him. For a second, there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Surprise? Regret?
No.
Just calculation. Well, he said, sipping his bourbon. The princess descends. You sent someone to take pictures of me? I said flatly. You leaked our plans. And now you've dragged others into this. I could ruin you. You already did, he said calm. But Emery, let me ask you something. Do you really think you belong there? Or are you just a rich girl with access? I didn't blink. I earned every second I spent being treated like a nobody in that building, I said. I saw how you ran it. With ego. With favoritism. With fear. You're scared of being replaced by someone who didn't need to tear others down to rise. He chuckled, swirling his drink. You think you're better than me? No, I said. I know I am. His grin faded. I dropped the folder on the table. He glanced at it. I brought this here as a warning, not a threat. You have until tomorrow morning to resign officially.
Publicly.
Take your buyout and walk. Or I'll burn everything. His jaw clenched. You wouldn't. I would, I said. Because I don't need approval. I need progress. I turned to leave, then paused. You know what really scares you, Carson? It's not that I'm better. It's that I didn't need to become like you to win. The next morning, the company's newswire lit up. Carson Lang, longtime executive, announces formal resignation. Cites health and family reasons. Internally, his betrayal was exposed, sanitized, and buried in legalese. But I knew. I'd won the battle. But the war for the company's soul was just beginning. Because now the spotlight wasn't just on me. It was only on me. And not everyone cheering wanted me to succeed. 2 weeks after Carson's resignation, things started moving fast, maybe too fast. I'd become the public face of a company no one thought I'd lead. And now, I was being flown out to Zurich to meet with a potential international investor, someone our company desperately needed to secure long-term stability. But I wasn't nervous about the flight or the pitch. I was nervous about something else. The whispers. Back at headquarters, I'd started to notice things. Meetings being rescheduled without my knowledge. Files locked behind vague IT errors. And the way 2 department heads suddenly stopped looking me in the eye. I wasn't paranoid. I was paying attention. In Zurich, I stepped into a sleek glass office overlooking the lake. Mr. Elias Bernard, the investor, stood as I entered. He was in his late 50s, sharply dressed, calm but sharp-eyed. He smiled with measured curiosity. "I've read a lot about you, Miss Gray," he said. "They say you dethroned a king." I smiled politely. I didn't come to dethrone anyone. I came to rebuild what was crumbling. He nodded. "Let's see what you're building, then." For the next hour, I walked him through projections, restructuring plans, team performance metrics, everything. He listened intently, occasionally raising a brow, but never interrupting. And then, just when I felt the room was tipping in my favor, he closed the folder and leaned back. "I have one concern," he said. "Some people in your company, people with influence, they're not convinced you have full control." My chest tightened. "Excuse me?" I asked carefully. "They say there's instability at the top. Leaks. Shifting loyalties. Someone's leaking updates to competitors. And someone else might be planning a quiet vote to push you out." I froze. "How do you know this?" I asked. He smiled calmly. "I have ears in your boardroom, just like you did when you played the intern." For a moment, I sat there, unable to speak. He leaned forward, voice softer now. "Here's what I want to know, Ms. Gray. Are you still playing defense, or are you ready to play offense?" That night, back in my hotel, I couldn't sleep. The faces of my team flashed through my mind: Elijah, Nina, Theo. Could one of them be working against me? No, I didn't want to believe that. But I couldn't afford to be sentimental. At 3:27 a.m., I called Maya. "I need background checks on every board member. Discreet. Every single one." "Even your team?" "Especially my team." Back in the States 3 days later, I walked into the office differently. Not as Emery the intern. Not even as Emery the EVP. I walked in like a woman with fire behind her eyes. I found Elijah in the hallway. His face lit up. "Zurich went well?" "It did," I said. "But I've learned something. There's still a snake in this building." He went pale. "Wait, you think?" "I don't know who yet," I said. "But I'm watching. And I'm done giving second chances." Later that afternoon, Nina barged into my office, breathless. "You need to see this," she said, throwing down a folder. Inside were printed emails, dozens of them. Someone using a proxy server. Secret communications between a senior VP and our rival firm. And the last one? From Theo. It read, "She's too emotional to last. Let me get her out of the way, then you'll get what you want." I sat still. "Emery," Nina said softly. "He's been feeding them updates for months. He was loyal to Carson. This isn't just competition. This is sabotage." I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just nodded. Then I picked up the phone. "Security? Please escort Mr. Theo Grant to conference room 7. Do not let him access any devices. And make sure the cameras are recording." I hung up. War had officially begun. The air in conference room 7 was thick. Not with noise, but with betrayal. Theo sat across from me, arms crossed, jaw tight. Security stood behind him, silent and still. He hadn't spoken a word since I walked in. I placed the folder of printed emails on the table. He didn't even look at them. "You could have come to me," I said. My voice was calm, but each syllable hit like glass under pressure. "You sat beside me for months. Helped me rebuild this company. Why?" He gave a small, humorless laugh. "You really don't get it, do you?" "I'd like to." "You came in and turned everything upside down," he snapped. "You didn't earn your seat. You dropped in like some silent angel with shares and secrets. I've worked here for 12 years. I bled for this place. And that justified betraying it. I didn't betray the company, he growled. I betrayed you. Silence. I leaned back slowly. That's worse. His eyes burned with resentment. You were never one of us. You were pretending, acting like you were learning, observing, but all you were doing was waiting to crush the old guard. No, I said firmly. I was learning who deserved to stay. I stood up, the folder still unopened between us. You're suspended effective immediately. Full investigation begins today. Your access is already revoked. Legal will follow up. He smirked. You think this makes you a leader? You think this makes you strong? I stepped closer. I think loyalty is earned. You gave yours to a man who is rotting this company from the inside. You chose the past. I'm building the future. 2 days later, the emergency board meeting was called. The room was quiet. Everyone tense. Even Maya looked rattled. This was it, the vote. Whether I would remain in control or be voted out in a whisper campaign fueled by old grudges and new fears. One by one, board members entered and took their seats. Most didn't look at me. Some offered forced nods. Others, nothing at all. The chairman, a neutral figure from the Gray Family Trust, stood up. We're here to discuss the motion brought forward by Vice Chair Ralston regarding Ms. Emery Gray's leadership. I cut in. Before that, I said, standing, I have something to share. I handed out sealed packets. Inside, Theo's leaked emails, transcripts, communications with rival execs, and statements from Nina and Elijah, sworn under penalty of perjury. There was no yelling, no outrage, just silence followed by a single sentence from the chairman. Mr. Grant has been permanently removed. The motion to challenge Ms. Gray's leadership is nullified. Someone clapped. Just once. Then another. And then the room shifted. That night, I stood in the lobby alone. Same glass walls. Same marble floors. Except this time, I wasn't the intern holding coffees. I was the one everyone now respected and feared. The whispers had stopped. The looks had changed. But my heart still raced. Because power isn't something you claim once. It's something you earn over and over, and I knew tomorrow would be another war. As I stepped outside, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Elijah. You didn't just save the company. You changed it. Proud to follow your lead. And another from Maya. You didn't become Carson. That's the win. I looked up at the city skyline. They told me to wait outside the conference room because interns don't sit with executives.
But now?
Now I owned the room they tried to lock me out of. And I wasn't leaving. Not ever again.